Wonders of St. Joseph, Part 3. St. Joseph, young husband of Mary. Old men don't walk to Egypt. We wonder why the Gospel makes so little mention of St. Joseph. But did it not say everything when it taught us that he was the husband of Mary? St. Joseph could not have been an old man when he espoused to Mary. Old men don't walk to Egypt. They don't walk 3 times a year from Nazareth to Jerusalem either. Good Father St. Joseph, I thank you for having watched over my mother Mary while you were on earth. I don't agree with the traditional picture of St. Joseph as an old man, even though it may have prompted by a desire to emphasize the perpetual virginity of Mary. I see him as a strong young man, perhaps a few years older than Our Lady, but in the prime of his life and work. If earthly princes consider it a matter of great importance to select carefully a tutor that is fit for their children, think about eternal God. In his almighty power and wisdom, chose out of creation most perfect and the living man Saint Joseph to be guardian of his divine and most glorious Son, the Prince of heaven and earth. Blessed William Joseph Chaminade echoes a similar idea about Saint Joseph, man from the perspective of his marriage to Our Lady. If God had charged you with the honorable task of choosing from among the kings a husband for the Blessed Virgin, would you not have given her the greatest mind in the world? And if he had ordered you to pick one of the saints, would you not have given her the greatest saint who would trod the earth? Now, do you think that the Holy Spirit, who is the author of this divine marriage, is less concerned than you are to provide her with a husband suited to her merits? As a father of Jesus, Saint Joseph was a zealous defender and a strong protector of his beloved son. He sacrificed everything, including pleasures of conjugal love, to fulfill the mission as a guardian of the Virgin and the Redeemer. Incidentally, many popes and saints use the word guardian in reference to Saint Joseph because he was the most legal sense, he is fatherly, and manly sense, he is protective. And guardian is someone who is strong, not only mind and heart but also physically. And St. John Henry Newman also spoke of the guardianship of St. Joseph and said he, St. Joseph, was a cherub, placed to guard the new terrestrial paradise from the intrusion of every foe. St. Joseph's manhood was a protective shield, a protective cloak for the Blessed Virgin. No man or beast could do any harm to the Virgin because St. Joseph stood attentive and ready to defend her even to the point of death. The cloud that in the old law overshadowed the tabernacle is the figure of St. Joseph's marriage with the Blessed Virgin. The cloud covered the tabernacle of the covenant and the glory of the Lord filled it. St. Joseph married a sacred veil which covers the mystery of incarnation. Everyone sees that Mary is a mother, but only Joseph knows that she is a virgin. God would not have given the most holy virgin to Joseph as his wife unless he had been holy and righteous. What right-minded father would ever give his most beloved daughter in marriage to a man who was not moral and beyond reproach according to his rank and state in life? I thank you, O Holy Patriarch Joseph, because we who are incapable of even knowing how to love Jesus and Immaculate Mother know and rejoice that you are at least loved her as she deserved to be loved, the worthy and true Mother of Jesus. As we all know that Mother Angelica, who founded the Eternal Word television network EWTN, her blessed network, extremely successful and fruitful Catholic media apostolate. And she was very simple with common sense, wisdom and unwavering orthodoxy that catechized the hearts and the minds of millions of people around the world. She died in 2016, but EWTN continues to lead many people to Jesus and the Catholic Church. Mother Angelica loved St. Joseph. On one occasion during a live telecast, a caller asked her a question about St. Joseph. Mother Angelica, do you think St. Joseph was old or young? Mother Angelica answered with her classic wit and responded, well, my dear, that's a good question. There is no official church teaching on whether or not St. Joseph was old or young. But I prefer young Joseph. All I know, sweetie, is old men don't walk to Egypt. Mother Angelica's straightforward answer makes a lot of sense. Not only would an elderly man not be capable of walking to Egypt, but an old man wouldn't be able to walk from Nazareth to Bethlehem either. Bethlehem is 80 miles from Nazareth and the journey would have been across rough desert terrain. St. Joseph was required to walk a lot to support the Holy Family. After walking 80 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem, St. Joseph was instructed by the angel to take the child and his mother to Egypt. This required St. Joseph to take the family on another long journey. The distance from Bethlehem to the border of Egypt is 40 miles. Historians also believe that the Holy Family did not live on the border. Rather, they went much ahead into Egypt where they had a possibility for work, food and some semblance of civilization. We don't know exactly where Jesus, Mary and Joseph settled down in Egypt, but it did require them to walk further down the border. Have you ever been to the Holy Land or North Africa? If you know, the terrain is very rough, intense heat and many dangers. Walking to Egypt in those days without anyone knowing and trying to make a living was not a things associated with elderly men. And then, after many years of living in Egypt, St. Joseph is told by the angel Herod is dead and to come back to his hometown. But now he is required to walk 120 miles back to Nazareth. The distance from these places is not meant for an old man because there were no smooth roads and cozy rest stops along the way. It is uphill, downhill, and around the hills. This endless walking doesn't stop the Holy Family from reaching Nazareth either. Many faithful Jews, the men of the household, were required to travel to Jerusalem 3 times a year for the fulfilling of the law, and that was 80 miles, a lot of walking. So Saint Joseph was a young man. So have you ever read such a statement about the saint's age? It is a good reason for asserting that Saint Joseph was a young man when he married, because our Lady cannot marry an old man. The Catholic Church has no formal official teaching on the age of Saint Joseph, and you are free to believe that he was old or young. You are free to believe, but it is hard to believe that he was an old man, because the physical demands of his mission can only make him a young man. If you consider the titles of the church given to Saint Joseph: guardian of the Redeemer, chaste guardian of the Virgin, guardian of virgins, as the model of workmen, terror of demons, etc., they lean in the direction that Saint Joseph is young and strong. These titles are not description of an elderly man who is incapable of guarding virgins or being model of laborers. It takes strength to be a guardian. It takes health to be a worker. So can an old man do these things? Mother Angelica would say old men don't walk to Egypt. Neither do old men guard anything whose safekeeping requires mobility and strength. None of this implies any moral fault of being an elderly man. The world is filled with countless old men who are virtuous, wise, and saintly. Yet old men are not known for physical capacity to do things of that kind that Saint Joseph was asked to do for the Holy Family. A vast majority of art over the century depicted Saint Joseph as an old man, and there is a article that is given by Venerable Fulton Sheen that reads thus: was he, Saint Joseph, old or young? Most of the statues and pictures we see of Joseph today represent him as an old man with grey beard, one who took Mary and her vow under his protection with somewhat same detachment as a doctor would pick up a baby girl in a nursery. We have, of course, no historical evidence of whatsoever concerning the age of Joseph. Some apocryphal accounts picture him as an old man. Fathers of the Church after the 4th century followed this legend rather rigidly. But one searches for the reasons why Christian art should have pictured Joseph as aged. We discover that it was in order better to safeguard the virginity of Mary. Somehow the assumption had gripped in the senility was a better protector of virginity than adolescence. Art thus unconsciously made Joseph a chaste spouse and pure by age rather than by virtue. But this is like assuming that the best way to show that a man should never steal is to picture him without hands. But more than that, to make Joseph out as old portrays for us a man who had little vital energy left, rather the one who, having it, kept him in the chains for God's sake and for his holy purposes. To make Joseph appear pure only because his flesh had aged is like glorifying a mountain stream that has dried. The church will not ordain a man to his priesthood who has no vital powers. She wants men who have something to tame, rather than those who are already tame because they have no energy to be wild. It should be no different with God. Furthermore, it is reasonable to believe that our Lord would prefer for a foster father someone who had made a sacrifice rather than someone who was forced to it. This is the added historical fact that Jews frowned on a disproportionate marriage between what Shakespeare called crabbed age and youth. So they admit that disproportionate marriage was for widows and widowers. Finally, it seems hardly possible that God would have attached a young mother, probably about 16 or 17 years of age, to an old man. If he did not disdain to give his mother to a young man, John, at the foot of the cross, then why should he have given her an old man at the crib? A woman's love always determines the way a man loves. She is the silent educator of his virile powers. Since Mary is what might be called a virginizer of young men as well as women and the greatest inspiration of Christian purity, should she not logically have begun by inspiring and virginizing the first youth whom she had probably ever met, that is Joseph the Just? It was not by diminishing his power to love, but by elevating it, that she would have her first conquest, and in her spouse the man who was a man and not a mere senile watchman. Joseph was probably a young man, strong, virile, and athletic, handsome, chaste, and disciplined. Instead of being a man incapable of loving, he must have been on fire with love. Just as we would have given every little credit to the Blessed Virgin if she had not taken the vow of virginity after having been an old maiden for 15 years, she wouldn't could we give much credit to Joseph, who became her spouse because he was advanced in years. Young girls in those days, like Mary, took vows to love God uniquely, and so did young men, of whom Joseph was one so preeminent to be called just. Instead, then, of being the dried fruit to be served on the table of the king, he was rather blossom filled with promise and power. He was not in the evening of life, but in the morning, bubbling over with energy, strength, and controlled passion. Mary and Joseph brought to their espousal not only their vows of virginity, but also two hearts with greater torrents of love than they had ever before coursed through human breasts. How much more beautiful Mary and Joseph became when we see in their lives what might be called the first divine romance. No human heart is moved by the love of the old for the young, but who is not moved by the love of the young for the young? In both Mary and Joseph, they were youth, beauty, and promise. God loves cascading cataracts and billowing waterfalls, but He loves them better, not when they overflow and drown the flowers, but when they are harnessed and bridled to light a city, to slake the thirst of a child. In Joseph and Mary, we do not find one controlled waterfall and dried up lake, but rather two youth who, before they knew the beauty of the one and the handsome strength of the other, willed to surrender these things for Jesus. Leaning over the manger crib of the infant Jesus, then are not age and youth, but youth and youth. The consecration of beauty in a maiden and the surrender of a strong comeliness in a man. Fulton Sheen is brilliant. As far as we can see, the entire history of the church has articulated a more convincing argument for a young St. Joseph than Fulton Sheen. The theology and art only depicted St. Joseph, an old man, not to protect the virginity of Mary. But the decision to depict St. Joseph as an old man, whether in preaching, art, or writing, did not work to safeguard Mary's virginity and purity. In the ancient Coptic text on the life of St. Joseph presents him as being 91 years old when he espoused to Mary. However, all historian theologians acknowledge that the sources for representing St. Joseph as an old man come from apocryphal and non-canonical documents. Relying on apocryphal writings to offer an age for St. Joseph leads to presentation of him like an old man, diminishing his virtue, importance, and greatness in the minds of Christians. No wonder few people have paid attention to him over the centuries. But St. Joseph is rarely included in the seminary classes of Christology, Mariology, Soteriology, and Ecclesiology. The man universally acclaimed as most loving, chaste, just, prudent, courageous, obedient, and faithful man ever lived doesn't even get mentioned in classes on theology and moral virtues. Thank God for the wisdom and insights of so many people like Saint Jose Marie Escriva, Mother Angelica, and Venerable Fulton Sheen. The Church needs to represent to her children an image of Saint Joseph that depicts him as a strong, masculine, and young figure. So there's a constant representation of him like an old man has severely wrapped out the understanding of the greatest saint besides Mary to walk this earth. It's time to reclaim him. For the Lord loves elderly people. The Lord loves a man's years of hard work, service, selfless dedication, and sacrificial love. Calm, just, and peaceful societies rest on the foundation of old men. Yet these men built foundations and pillars of civilization when they were young. Likewise, formative years of Jesus Christ were lovingly ruled by a strong young father named Joseph. He was hardworking, caring, virtuous father who laid the foundation for human growth and development of Jesus. While there is no doubt there is an old man is capable of being holy, as young man, it takes a strong young father to teach a boy how to swing an axe, work with wood, carry lumber, walk great distances, and earn a living by the sweat of his brow. So that makes a lot of sense that Saint Joseph was a loving husband of Mary, not retired husband, incapable of manual work and long journeys, but yet he was known by everyone in as a father of Jesus, not grandfather of Jesus. As a father of Jesus, Saint Joseph was zealous defender and strong protector of his son. He sacrificed everything for the sake of his son. So therefore, a man is charged with guarding a territory for the intrusion of the foe needs to be physically powered man, not an elderly man requiring a cane. Like a powerful cherub dedicated to protection service as the Queen of Angels, he is required to guarding the temple of Mary's body and in particular virginity. Mary's guardian had to be young and strong in order to fulfill his mission. Elderly man would probably not have strength to guard a young wife. Neither would elderly man be likely have the stamina to raise an infant son. So just Saint Joseph was a protective shield, a cloak for the Blessed Virgin. No man or beast could do any harm to her because he was attentive and ready to defend her even to the point of death. As a young father and a husband, he did model the manhood of his son Jesus. Every boy should be able to look up to his father to understand what it means to be a man. If Saint Joseph had been an elderly man, Jesus would have observed in his father no physical strength and through love to put into practice, which was heroic chastity, hard work, and bodily gestures of piety, kneeling, for example. If St. Joseph were 2 or 3 times the age of his wife, what would Jesus have observed in his father? Afternoon naps and forgetfulness. Again, there's nothing wrong with old age. Growing old is part of human life, but St. Joseph himself aged as life went on, as happens to all men. What would God the Father entrust the upbringing and education of his son, the Lion of Judah and King of Kings, to an elderly, fragile man? Probably not. What the church and the world can learn from this young depiction of Saint Joseph in theology, preaching, literature, and art is that young men are chaste, heroic, and holy. Indeed, church has countless young men who kept their chastity and purity for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, and Saint Joseph is the greatest among them. Saint Joseph was a young, tender, loving husband of Mary and always chaste, modest, and pure. Mary loved Joseph. Her manly love for her was strong and always controlled by reason and faith. His virile powers, always held in restraint and service to God's will, made him the most virtuous father and husband ever to walk this earth. No woman has ever had a greater man than Saint Joseph. So, what are we to gain from the wonder of Saint Joseph? Are you required to believe that he was young? If you do understand, at least based on the physical demand this mission would have, why it makes him that sense to see a young Joseph rather than old. Regardless of what depiction you see and you prefer to see, Saint Joseph is your loving, strong, fearless spiritual father. Thank you for all that he did for you out of selfless love for Jesus and your spiritual mother Mary. Thank you for all that he does for you, for he loves you. You don't have to wait to be old or lifeless to practice the virtue of chastity. Purity comes from love, and the strength and the gaiety of youth are no obstacle for noble love. Joseph had a young heart and a young body when he married Mary. When he learned of the mystery of her divine motherhood, when he lived in her company, respecting the integrity God wished to give the world as one more sign that he had come to share the life of his creatures. Anyone who cannot understand a love like that knows very little of true love and is a complete stranger to the Christian meaning of chastity.